Guten Tag. Schön, dass Sie sich heute aus ganz unterschiedlichen Orten dazuschalten,
Good to have you here
mehr über ein
today
neues Messe- und
from all
Eventformat aus Köln
across
zu erfahren.
the world to learn more about a new trade fair
Viele
format.
Expertinnen haben lange und
Many
intensiv auf
experts
diesem Tag
have
hingearbeitet und von sich nun
worked hard to
heute
see
der
this
Startschuss
day
gegeben werden.
and are very
Mein Name ist
pleased
Katja
that
Diel.
we have the
Unter dem
kickoff
Namen
here today. My name is
Needsbased bin ich als
Katja Diel.
Mobilitätsexpertin
I
und
am a mobility
Zukunftsaktivistin
expert
tätig.
and a future
Ich freue mich
activist.
sehr, dass ich Ihnen heute nicht nur einen
I'm
Ausblick
very
auf die
pleased to
polisMOBILITY
give you
2022
an
geben darf,
overview on
sondern auch
polisMOBILITY
hochkarätige Gäste an meiner
2021,
Seite haben
but
werde.
I also will be able to
Bevor es zu
introduce to you high
Missverständnissen
caliber
kommt,
guests here
alle hier
today.
anwesenden Personen wurden heute
To avoid
negativ auf Covid
misunderstandings,
getestet.
everybody here
Zum
has a
Technikkonzept
negative
der Sendung
COVID
enthält natürlich auch
test result.
Mindestabstände, es
Of
tragen
course,
die
we
Maske
have
vor letzte
here
Räume
minimum
und Desinfektion.
distance,
Sie
here
können während
we
der
have
gesamten
masks here,
Pressekonferenz
etc.
im Chat
During the
Ihre Fragen
entire
platzieren.
press
Sollten
conference,
Sie
you
keinen
can
Google-Account
place
besitzen,
your
können Sie auch
questions on the
Fragen
chat.
an
Should you have
f.mann@kölnmesse.de
no Google
schicken.
account, you can also
Wichtige Dinge Fragen an
send
mich
questions to
weiterleiten. Dafür reichen Assistenten in Händen. Und ich stelle
f.mann@kölnmesse.de.
sie dann in unserem Fragerunden
The
mit unseren
editors will
Expertinnen.
forward
Ich möchte
these
Sie ermuntern, Desinfektion
questions
gleich
to
zu
me, and
nutzen.
I will
Zurück
present
zum
them
Thema von
to
polisMOBILITY.
the panelists. But
Urbane
back to
Mobilität, das
polisMOBILITY,
ist das
urban
eigentlich. Für
mobility.
mich
Now, what's that?
ein buntes Aquarium
For
von
me,
vielen
it's a whole
Schutzräumen,
host of
der
various
einander
different
jeweils mit
forms of
ausreichend Raum
mobility
und Sicherheit bedeckt sind.
which
Ein
have
Aquarium
sufficient
ist für den
space
Menschen
and
zu nutzen,
safety.
nicht die Fahrzeuge. Das
It's
Bedürfnisse der
the
Menschen
focus
erfüllt und
on
dabei
human beings
komfortabel
living
und
up to
klimafreundlich
human
zugleich ist.
needs and is
Das heißt
comfortable
auch,
and climate
junge
friendly at
Menschen
the same
mobil zu
time.
machen,
That
gehört
is
es
to
vielleicht auch
say
zwingend dazu.
that we mobilize
Alte
people
Menschen,
that are
Mobilitätseingeschränkte,
neglected,
aber vor allem
people,
auch Kinder,
older,
deren Mobilität
elderly,
gerade erst zu entdecken
children who
beginnt.
are starting to discover their
Eines meiner
mobility
Highlights
needs.
2020 war die Teilnahme an der Killiken Mass,
We had the
an der
Kilken
auch
Mask
Oberbürgermeisterin Henriette
highlight
Reker,
where
die ich gleich begrüßen
Mayor
darf,
Henriette
teilgenommen hat.
Reker was
Tausende von
part
Kindern
of,
und
and
Erwachsenen
she will be with us in a
eroberten
minute.
deutschlandweit
Thousands
wie auch
of
in Köln
adults
die
in
Straßen und
Europe
waren
and in
gemeinsam auf
Cologne
den Rock'n'Roll-Tours.
conquered
Ich
the
bekomme heute noch
city
Gänsehaut, wenn ich an
streets and
diesen
were
sonnigen
on
Tag
their
in Köln
bicycles.
zurückdenke.
It still gives me
Kinder mussten
goosebumps when I
beinahe von den
consider and
kleinen
recall this
Laufrädern
wonderful
geholt
day.
werden. So sehr hatten sie
The
es
kids were
genossen,
so
einmal ganz frei mit ihren Eltern unterwegs zu sein
enthusiastic
und eben nicht
in
von
their
vor oder
feelings
aufmachen
here
zu müssen,
in their
um zu
experience
schauen,
when they were
ob sie
on bike
weiterfahren können.
with their
Ein starkes
parents.
Zeichen für selbstbestimmte
This is a
Mobilität.
strong sign
Wer
for
ist neben der Oberbürgermeisterin
self-determined
Reker heute noch
mobility.
zu Gast? Ich
Who will
erwarte
be
eine
here
Videobotschaft
in
von
addition to
Professor Dr. Andreas Pinkbart,
Mayor Reker? We
dem
have a
Minister für
video
Wirtschaft,
from
Innovation,
Professor Dr.
Digitalisierung und
Pinkbart, the
Energiegesang
Minister
Nordrhein-Westfalen.
for Energy,
Gerhard
Innovation
Böse,
and
der
Digitization
CEO
of
der
North
Köln-Messe,
Rhine-Westphalia,
wird die
Mr.
Bedeutung der
Böse, the
Großveranstaltung
CEO
des Köln-Messe
of the
herausstellen.
Cologne Trade
Professor
Fair,
Dr.
will
Matthias vom
explain
Deutschen Zentrum
to
für Luft-
us
und Raumfahrt führt uns
the
allen
importance of that
erstmalig
trade
im
fair.
Auftrag der Messe Köln auf der
Professor Yip will present us a
In
study
der zweiten Hälfte der
on behalf
Pressekonferenz
of the
stellt
city
Ihnen
of
Köln-Messe
Cologne and the
COO
DLR.
Oliver
And
Frese
then we have
die
COO
polisMOBILITY in Detail
Oliver
vorstellt.
Frese. He will give
Professor
you an
Dr. Moritz
overview in
Bussmann,
detail
der die
of
Polis-Information für das
the
Polis-Magazin verantwortet,
trade
und Dr.
fair.
Wolfgang Weber,
Dr.
der
Wolfgang
CEO des
Weder, the CEO of the
Zentralverband
ZWEE,
Elektrotechnik und Elektronikindustrie, werden im
the electronics
Talk mit mir
industry
und Herrn Frese
central
die neue Veranstaltungsrichtlinie
administration will be discussing with me this new format. The city of Cologne strives to be a pioneer in the area of urban mobility, and with the Cologne Trade Fair, it found a partner bringing this into a format which is unique in Germany, because polisMOBILITY is more than just 4 days of trade fair on the trade grounds. It will also include the city of Cologne. The focus will be on the city, on the citizens, on the industry. What does polisMOBILITY stand for? Polis stands for Greek, the city, and mobility stands for the moving city. Cologne will present itself with a new format of trade fairs, which will pick on this idea. We start with the pedestrians. We are on foot every day, and there's so many different aspects to mobility. All these facets will be shown at the polisMOBILITY, which will be hosted for the first time in Cologne in 2021. And now, having said that, I would like to pass on the floor to Minister Pinkbart and his view on this concept from the capital, in Düsseldorf. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to have this video message to you that I'm also digitally involved in the polisMOBILITY announcement. polisMOBILITY, with this new innovative concept, will enrich North Rhine-Westphalia as a location for trade fairs. North Rhine-Westphalia is one of the most populous cities in countries in Germany, has a lot to do with mobility. Cologne, our most populous city in North Rhine-Westphalia, the daily mobility is a stress test. So our future coexistence for that, the good mobility is of utmost importance. We in North Rhine-Westphalia therefore said we want to be a pioneer in the area of emission-low mobility. polisMOBILITY will give us an excellent opportunity to showcase this. We have the research institutes in North Rhine-Westphalia which are working on low-emission integration mobility technology, so will present their findings to a broad spectrum of visitors. And that is also very important for the automotive industry in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is a very important part of the industrial landscape of our state. Innovation like automated mobility improve competitiveness of the automotive industry companies in North Rhine-Westphalia. Mega trends like digitization and connectivity are very important for the automotive industry. They are decisive drivers for transformation. The industry is an enabler for mobility of the future. The change in mobility is a cross-cutting societal issue. Politics, scientific community, the industry, and above all the citizens. polisMOBILITY addresses all these target groups and treads new paths and presents also outside the trade fair grounds the mobility with its challenges where it is needed in the city, in the rural side. Mobility, you can experience it during the pandemic and during the shutdown. The polisMOBILITY is a very important sign for North Rhine-Westphalia as a trade fair location. North Rhine-Westphalia trade fairs play an important role for reviving the industry because the industry needs this as a stage to present its services and products and cater to their networks. Virtual network marketing are a very important add-on to physical trade fairs. polisMOBILITY will be future-oriented and will be a mobility platform 365 days a year. So I'm looking forward to polisMOBILITY, and I'm looking forward to the kick-off of that trade fair in May 2022, and you will be on board, I'm sure. Thank you, Mr. Pinkwart, for this highly motivating statement. I would like to welcome the Mayor of the City of Cologne, Henriette Ricke, and the CEO of the Cologne Fair, Mr. Böse. We were on bicycle last year together, so I'm looking forward to your address. What's the importance of that trade fair for Germany and for Cologne?
Right, I would very happily explain that to you. I grew up in Cologne myself, where lots of people were really proud to live in a proper car city. I mean, a passenger car basically stood for the most modern means of transport. And Cologne was to build the infrastructure for this. We had important players of the automotive industry that provided jobs and affluence as well. But the increasing number of cars actually brought problems for the people in the cities. We see this day in, day out, every day today. And I have firmly decided that I want to basically enthuse our city for mobility of the 21st century, because that is what is the order of the day today. And I know Cologne is ready for this. As a city where for over 2,000 years, most important trading routes have been intersecting. We've always been open to traffic and transport innovations. We basically didn't just invent it with the internal combustion engine, but here from Cologne, they were sent out into the rest of the world. The traffic and transport change needed for today is certainly going to be happening here as well, and happens on our minds as well. Many of those of us have already gone through it, and I'm one of those as well. So today I'm not just standing here as the Madam Mayor of a car city, but a Madam Mayor of one of the smartest, most modern, mobility-orientated city. Now, dear audience, the change in traffic and transport infrastructure is top on most cities' agenda and also on mine, because seamless mobility is the prerequisite to success in many areas. So changing our attitude when it comes to traffic and transport is an important aspect of success everywhere. It doesn't take away from us, it actually adds new momentum, gives room for new industries and business models. For me, this change means that we go through the transformation from a city made to fit cars and accommodate cars and up to a smart and human-adjusted city. I see lots of positive things: emissions-free traffic and transport, more green area, and we're giving way to cyclists and foot passengers, changing us into a European smart city, an intelligent traffic and transfer system, and shared economy. Now, the case studies that my colleagues have worked on from lots of European metropolis and German cities have gone to show very clearly the way to our target is as multifaceted as it is ambitious. And many measures are experiencing a renaissance, and new technologies actually open up entirely new avenues of getting there. Well, Beijing, for example, rediscovered cycling. Paris and Barcelona, just the same. They think about their districts and quarters in a completely new way, and quickly and non-bureaucratically they make space for foot passengers and cyclists. Tel Aviv and Hamburg, for example, set new standards for digital traffic and transport infrastructure and a vibrant startup culture. Ladies and gentlemen, in Cologne, we just really want to make sure we support this great e-commerce business by basically doing the last mile with an e-powered load bike. But there are also impediments that impede the fast development of these structures. The question obviously is, how can we get to these solutions very quickly as possible? And that is why we need polisMOBILITY, a new Cologne trade fair. We will ask it how we can get there, and it will come up with answers, and it will give us answers towards a better, faster, smart mobility in the 21st century. It is going to tie in initiatives, administrations, NGOs, universities, startups, and companies as a whole will all be brought together, and it brings room for interconnection, for new approaches, and for more. We're offering you our Rhine metropolis as a real-life laboratory to test everything and anything that will make our mobility in the future. And if we bring our trade fair into the city centre for all our people of Cologne, we will basically have a much stronger lever to get there with our mobility change. Dear ladies and gentlemen, behind this trade fair concept, you find not just myself as the Lord Mayor of the city of Cologne, but all of the democratic forces of our city have clearly committed themselves to this. And in a resolution of the city council, we have decided to start a mobility trade fair for the city. And many of our companies and startups here are supporting this. Cologne and polisMOBILE. Cologne has the competence, Cologne has the enthusiasm, and we're all looking forward to the fact that as of 2022, Cologne is going to give the impulse for smart mobility in the 21st century. I hope to see you then. at the latest, obviously, next year. And I look forward to Mr. Böse. Well, right, thank you, Ms. Reker. Ladies and gentlemen, cities are the states of tomorrow, is what I'd like to say. More and more people around the globe live in cities, making them the most powerful players and key problem solvers in our globalized world. This strong statement is the essence of a compendium of the trend researcher Matthias Hawkes, who describes the leading role and the obligation of urbanity in answering the crucial question of our society today. How is it that we want to live together in the future? It is a key insight into the brand new study produced by the German Aerospace Center DLR, a study actually commissioned by the city of Cologne, and we will be presenting this study, see it being presented by Professor Jib. And the statement, in a nutshell, is the city is a place on the move. The urban population and its desire for mobility is growing wherever you look. And therefore, the central question for all of us and the DLR here is, how is it that we do want to live and move in our cities of the future? These two approaches are what drives us here, us as Köln Messe and the city of Cologne, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, and many high-ranking stakeholders going ahead with polisMOBILITY. Having said that, I would like to welcome all of you as well, obviously. Today we'll get a first glimpse at how we plan to give the complexities of mobility a new format. And it's a format that not only represents innovative mobility solutions in the exhibition halls, but also within the urban setting of our city, creating an emotional experience. Urban space will be the focus of a comprehensive exchange between companies, municipalities, interested citizens, urban planners and other cities. Urbanity, or urbanism, and that is also emphasized by Hawkes and the DLR, will be a powerful source for new ways of living and thinking. And I'm very pleased that time has come for this thinking, because it is something we've been involved with at Köln Messe for quite some time. In 2010, we organized the German Pavilion at the largest World Expo in history in Shanghai, just as we're doing this year at Expo Dubai. Even back then in Shanghai, the topic was Better City, Better Life. The German pavilion was called Balance City, a city and balance. It was filled with impressive examples and projects and products for the harmonious interaction between mobility and quality of life in cities. That idea has stayed with us ever since. We've learned from first projects such as the Urban Technology Trade Fair in 2011 and the Electromobilia Trade Convention in 2013, not just to focus on individual aspects of the complexities, but on the big generic picture as a whole. This comprehensive approach can be seen online from the 18th to the 21st of May 2022 in Cologne, and beyond that will stay online throughout the year. As we've just impressively heard from Mayor Reker, the city of Cologne, its committees and districts, and Cologne's mayor are wholeheartedly committed to these issues. We see mobility as being the master key towards future urban quality of living, involving many areas: urban infrastructure, real estate, basic digital technology, and of course traffic and transport in all of its facets. The spectrum of possibilities is enormous, and new mobility concepts will take hold, sometimes disruptively, and bring together private, shared and public means of transport with the support of digitization. The automotive, energy and real estate industries, startups and established companies, public transport companies and urban planners will all have to work together. And it will be Köln Messe's role to go in as an organizer to merge all of this, amalgamate it and present applicable market-driven solutions, products and processes. But more about this in just a few moments. I'm delighted that we've been able to find the ideal project partner with whom to just implement all of this. Professor Dr. Johannes Bußmann enjoys an excellent reputation throughout Germany with his Polis convention in Düsseldorf, and he's now exploring new horizons together with us. He too will address you later, and you'll hear more of him and about him. We are already attracting very strong interest from the entire ecosystem around urban mobility. The topics, trends and developments we're addressing with polisMOBILITY do shed light on global challenges and show where solutions are already in existence around the globe. Our event format reflects the zeitgeist, if I may say so. Now, instead of just a mere product show, we are rather defining a contemporary event. We have worked on combining live on-site experiences with a digital global reach and to be present way beyond the physical trade show throughout the year. Therefore, polisMOBILITY will also give the worldwide community a digital home throughout the whole of the year. This combination of a physical experience and digital offerings is almost a blueprint for formats even after the pandemic. Köln Messe relies on hybrid events, and in the case of polisMOBILITY, this is a three-tier approach. The flexibility of our grounds, which we're continuing to expand on, an efficient digital platform, and expansion into the city of Cologne as such, providing us with a practical litmus test in urban reality. I thank you for having joined us today, and I now look forward to discovering together with you what makes polisMOBILITY so unique. Well, thank you very much to Mr. Böse, to whom we already have to say farewell. Mrs. Rieker is going to join us for a talk at the end. But we're now coming to a point that I find really important. Well, at the moment, there are some trends in Germany that show that we have to basically work together more. I mean, there are informations presented by scientists that we should be listening to much more. And I think it's very nice to see that when it comes to polisMOBILITY, we do listen to one another, we do cooperate with others. The DLR, for example, is with the studies here. The Professor Lipp, is here and will present the initial results.
Well, I'm very pleased to be with you here today and present to you some insights into our study on climate neutral and needs-based mobility in the city. Before I start my input, I would like to ask you just go back in time 18 months. How many kilometers did you travel a day? If you say 40 kilometers, then you're quite on the average side here in Germany. As you can see here on the left-hand side, here, most of these kilometers were on account of leisure activities. But let's go to the next step. Now, how did you travel these kilometers? Tram, car, on foot, bicycle? And if you answer that you were traveling by car, then you're still in the majority, because 43% of all of these trips are done by car. Now, next question, where do you live? Now, the previous speakers have already mentioned it. The majority of all people in Germany, of course, lives in the urban space, 63% in the cities, and this is increasing. And if you put all these figures together, then you will explain, you get explained what you see here. You see these pictures time and again. This traffic jams, nobody likes to get stuck in a traffic jam, but it only shows how crowded our city streets have become, and how ugly some streets have become in the cities. And of course, you can imagine how loud it is if you imagine the noise of the motor and how much kids are burdened in the cities. And if you park these cars, of course, you will see that they also consume a lot of space when they are parked. And this space is then not there for encounters, spaces of encounters, or for greens. This is typical for the cities worldwide, this. So what does it mean? We have a challenge before us. We have to make sure that our mobility in our cities becomes climate neutral and needs-based. And in our study, we've been looking at the elements in order to get to that objective. 7 of these elements we have identified. The most important is top left. We may talk about mobility, we talk about people. People decide for themselves how they want to travel, how they want to be mobile. Of course, there are needs that are inherent in ourselves, and that these need to be met. And of course, there is also freight traffic. Sometimes we want to get a parcel delivered, we want to get, things that we need to get. And these are also needs-based things. And on the other hand, we have offerings. We do more car sharing. We do more bicycle sharing, e-scooter sharing. So we don't own sometimes these vehicles anymore. Automated driving, everybody talks about that now. There's new drive forms like hydrogen or electromobility pop up. Bicycle paths have become renowned. There's startup scene in the cities. All these elements can be linked, so they're not separated. And if I would like to bring you on a virtual trip around the world, then you will see that in many cities across the world, some of these elements have already been tested, implemented, and there have been already very good experience made with these new things. And of course, this trip around the world will start in Germany, in Cologne. Ms. Reger already said it here. These bikes are very important for the city mobility. We need to bring goods to their future owners. And of course you can do that with a car, but you can also do that with these bicycles, climate neutral. The city of Cologne has set up a subsidy program where you can buy such a bicycle. You get some subsidy for that, and that there is more cycle paths and for them, and also parking places for them. And there's also innovative drives for them, so it's not such a chore. But let's move to another place. Let's move to China. This is a kind of a highway for bicycles. Here, neighborhoods in Peking, you can get from one to the other very comfortably and swift. Almost 8,000 people use these here every day. Let's move back to Germany, go to Mannheim, on the shores of the Rhine. Here you see an automated bus, an e-bus, which can be very well operated in order to link certain remote neighborhoods to with the city center, making mass transport more attractive. Now, in other cities, where you can set up here your charger here at some traffic light, at some city and road light. Just go to Israel here and visit the city zone. Here startups can meet, can exchange as regards innovative mobility solutions, or move to Berlin, where the Mobility Act has been developed in cooperation with citizen involvement here. This is just a small trip around the world. There are so many exciting solutions across the world which are being implemented, but we can learn from. Now, this vision of climate neutral, needs-based mobility in the urban space can only be achieved if all these elements are brought together and creating a beautiful picture, hopefully. It is not about implementing standalone solutions, but implementing many solutions which will change mobility, improve mobility, and that there it is important that cities need to learn from the experience of other cities. And What do I mean? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's important to learn what other cities have already had in terms of new experiences. And if you are a fast learner, then you come closer to that climate neutral and needs-based mobility and city mobility much closer and faster. I.e., what does it mean? The key message of our study is the following. It is important to bring these elements together and to also learn what does work, what did work, what was accepted by the population, and how can it help us. Because diversity is the power that drives the mobility of the future. And having said that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the questions here. A good key cue here, because that brings me to the Q&A. In the chat, you can, I would like to remind you that this is an opportunity to put your questions in the chat, and you can put these forward here also to Ms. Reker, she will join us in this Q&A. Working together, I think, is very important here, and the professor has mentioned it, and for me it's also a very important signal. We must move from silos. We must cooperate. Are there examples where you say, "Oh, this was very impressive, and that's what I would like to have in Cologne at the polisMOBILITY trade fair"? Oh, there are so many very nice examples of that. Connectivity is important. Networking is important. In Berlin, I think it was a good idea to get the citizens involved, because we change the situation in the cities, and we should not implement mobility solutions top-down. And therefore, this Mobility Act was a very nice example here in Berlin. And when I think of Israel, there was this networking of companies via Citizen. Corporations had the opportunity to, check what would be working and what would not be working. And so a second type of networking, so to speak. And also, communities should and municipalities should look at other municipalities and check what's working there, what's not working there. And there are also partnerships here. In the rural area, they have moved certain good experiences to other cities in order to control commuter traffic, for example. So what you're saying is everything is already there, you just need to network properly. Is that a exchange that you support as a scientist, where you also feel, okay, there's closer cooperation internationally? Yes, of course, the scientists need this exchange as well. We know how mobility works, what needs are. But the good thing about human beings is needs are changing. Everybody's changing over time. So we need to learn and continuously and need exchange. And that's why we are always very, very happy when we are involved with the municipalities, with industrial players. And thank you. And I would like to get Ms. Reker into this again, because Ms. Reker addressed a very important point. How can we learn from one another? What role does Cologne play? What does Cologne politics play? Ms. Reker was saying, our task is it in Cologne to set a good example. And how can we make progress? What has impressed you most in this study, Ms. Reker? I think we need to be thinking human-centric. This is something you cannot translate into German. Actually, this should be livable. The city. If you leave your home, that you not get rolled over by a car. That you have comfortable mobility, irrespective of your age, whether you have your handicap or not, and I would wish I would be very, very pleased if we would make transportation more climate neutral. And of course, electromobility may be a factor here, might help, but it will not be the only factor. Maybe like these short trips, we should be able to do them with a very comfortable modes of transport, and we have to come up with an offer, because only then people will change into a more clean car or what have you. Many know and feel that something needs to be changed, but many are lacking the big picture. What's your vision? What's your big picture 10 years on, 20 years on? Let's dream. What will we see in Cologne then? Oh, well, look, people tell me, complain about the situation in Cologne, and they say, look at Copenhagen, look at Amsterdam. But we are coming from a different starting point. With my colleague in Amsterdam, we discussed last time how he was able to build so many bicycle paths. And he said, look, Rotterdam started building these bicycle paths following the Second World War. Sorry, it was Rotterdam, not Amsterdam. We need to make sure that the city becomes human-centric, more livable, and the right forms of mobility needs to be found. And I think this trade fair can make a contribution to that, because it will come up with the offer that is needed. We have our bicycles here in Cologne, like these load-carrying ones. At the beginning, people laughed about them, but now they are part of the transportation mix, and we are also now doing parking lots for them. It's about urban space and redistribution of urban space. Of course, we need to come up with offers, but they need space. E-scooters were added to a space which was too close already. Of course, you need to convince population. If people are not convinced, they will not accept the offer. And you need to also think holistically. You mentioned these load-carrying bicycles, for example. If it is on the sidewalk, you put it there, then there's a problem. We have to make sure that it is easily usable, and the negative effects of adding a new mode of transport needs to be thought of from the outset. The earlier I start discussing this with people, the better I get, the faster I get the feedback, and the better the solution will be on our way to a human-centric city. Do we have examples where we can look forward to? We need to prepare the way for mobility. Are there any projects in Cologne that you will support? In Cologne, we can test what the facts are. We have electromobility in Cologne has priority. That's our policy. And you can then show by way of concrete examples what does it really mean. And we have partner cities that take the lead. In Beijing, you only had bicycles, and then you had cars, and now you come back to bicycles again. So there is a progressive development in such a capitale here. It's been our partner city for 30 years. Barcelona is also a partner city of ours, also shows what can be done. Entire neighborhoods are car-free now, and we are in a city where there's few cars, we feel like on holidays we move more freely, you breathe more freely, you're sitting in a cafe, not between a wall and a car, but you can look at the other side of the street and there's no car in between. So that should be our objective, make it more livable, the city, make it more climate neutral, and I think that is a very good supplement. You said from Scandinavia. They have also other reasons, not just ecology, because you're faster by car, by bicycle, for example. If you look at that highway in Beijing, is that something that you could also envisage for Germany? Will there be spaces reallocated? Yeah, that was a new construction. It's two neighborhoods which are roughly 7 kilometers apart, and at the time they found if you move to the office or home, then the cities are just full and they will be in the traffic jam. It costs time and it's not attractive. And then they thought, how can we do better? And if we just add to the street that cycle path, then there may be also a problem. Therefore, they built a standalone, a dedicated 3-lane bicycle highway, separated from the normal roads. And the people, when they go by bike using this bicycle highway, they save 20 minutes. I mean, if you move, you want to arrive. You know, that's why you're on the move. Yeah, well, but that's why I'm saying car is car. Even an e-car can get stuck in a traffic jam. What does it mean? Do we need new values in order to get to that human-centric city? Currently, we are inert. So there's the pandemic. We have achieved the climate objectives last year. It was not the result of a policy, but rather the result of the pandemic. Do we have a chance to change things now, starting from now? We have to think differently. Only when I was adult, I started riding bicycles, and I go to the south of Germany where I do my holidays. There's nice bicycle paths, and then I'm brave enough to use a bicycle. And now I do that in Cologne as well. And also for the elderly that have never used a bicycle, we give them the opportunity to acquire a bicycle driving license, so to speak, so that they learn how to use a bicycle. And maybe then you have an opportunity to get to know new things, because otherwise in the car you're concentrating on other things and not observing the surroundings. So there is a new quality of life here. The factor, the human factor. Are you looking forward to that playing a more important role in future? Yes, of course. Yes, if not, then I'd be at the wrong place. The human factor plays a very important role, has always played an important role, because we decide for ourselves what mobility we use. It's in our hands, what we do and what we don't do. So that's where the opportunity lies. As you explained, do we take the car to drive to the office, or do we use the bike and enjoy a bike ride along the Rhine? And that is a choice that we have in future.
Well, I've already integrated a few of the questions that have come in. You can send some more. They'll all get to me here. Mrs. Rika, you've just said there are women in my age group who are no longer cycling a bike, and there are kids who no longer learn to cycle. So, I mean, you can basically pragmatically go about this and ask, why do people do this? How do you see the role of children and their mobility in this context? Well, that is crucial, obviously, because obviously learning to ride a bike is a step of development. I mean, first we crawl and then we walk along hills held by hand, then we walk solidly, and then we go on a Leica bike, and then we have a first bike. I mean, unless it's too dangerous. And then there is something missing here. This is for the sense of equilibrium, and I think it's very good that if you then have a cycle path and that you can safely go on, and when you fall, it's not as high as an adult, so therefore that's better for a child. I mean, I basically would no longer go on a snowboard now. Once you're an adult, you think about things too much and you no longer learn these things so quickly. You just said you're a psychologist. I mean, what does the fear factor mean? Is it, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're cycling anyway, I'm cycling anyway, despite the dangers that I theoretically perceive. Well, that problem of fear, it always is that it avoids a certain behavior, and then you don't have a positive experience either. So basically with the bike, it would mean I'm a bit scared, but when I get on, I see, oh, it's actually not as bad as I thought. I can do this, and then there's the potential for change. And for me, mobility is a routine thing. So if day in, day out, you get into your car and drive into the office, and the likelihood is that you'll continue doing that, basically for the rest of your life. And the earlier you learn a different routine, the more likely it is that that routine gathers momentum and gets taken on. And that is why it's always good to start early. But Mrs. Rieker, the real-life laboratories that are going to be happening with polisMOBILITY, that they will basically give an impulse to do something different. Yes, exactly, because then the situation is possibly not as dangerous as otherwise. Or an urban developer also means that in a new city district, we actually plan a cycle path that leads to things centrally, so that people do not have the automatic option of saying, oh, there's a road, I'll drive, but yes, there's this beautiful cycle path, I'll cycle. I mean, you just did this study for the DLR. Are there things that you're looking forward to? We heard about cargo bikes and load bikes. Are there other things that you're looking forward to, where you say this is something that is changing us towards the positive? Well, for me, that means I experience a feeling of freedom, because at the end of the day, in my car, I'm fenced in, I'm locked in, I'm insulated, and I'm also a lot more dependent upon other cars around myself, very different from when I'm cycling. And I actually feel it's freer. I mean, then breathing clean air is also super, because, I mean, in the car, you're in the car, everything's filtered and whatever, it's not as fun. I mean, it's obviously, you cycle to your fitness studio with your bike rather than with your car. Professor Yip, you just said you basically have to look at what are the modules that can be used to change intra-urban mobility. But once you go in there, you say you already have a good toolbox, and we hold those tools available for use. Well, I think it's very good to put the different modules together so that we basically have a beautiful mosaic of different pieces. You look at it and you think, oh, cool. I mean, this is fun, moving about this city. There are solutions for all mobility problems, and it works as an interconnected image as well. I think that is the extremely interesting and exciting aspect of this. And when you look at the offers, you can see that we already have lots of these modules, and now it's about cleverly putting them together. Now, Mrs. Rieker, if you look at Cologne, what would be your recommendation if somebody wants to start cycling again? Is there an area where you say that there's good infrastructure? Well, I'm a fan of basically having the project Ring Frei, and I think that is something that gives us a head start over other cities. But it's not easy to explain. Yes, we need a system, a network of cycle paths, but you basically have to start building it at some point. And this, you can't come up with a magic wand and tap it and there they all are. You have to start somewhere, and you basically then have to add bits and pieces when there is time you can afford them. And obviously you need different perspectives. Mrs. Rieker already said children are restricted in their mobility, and well, or there are groups of society that who can't use cars, firstly because they don't have the money or whatever. They need alternative forms of transport. They don't want it for ecological reasons. Well, I find it extremely important, and that is why I put climate neutrality right next to the needs-orientated. I mean, that is my German word for this human-centric. I mean, I found it difficult to find an appropriate German word for that too. And I think we shouldn't actually just say we can no longer have mobility to achieve climate neutral conditions. And I think it's important to use everything that we have. I mean, we also have people with disabilities or special needs, or there are different needs regarding my own mobility. If, for example, I come to an event like this one, I wouldn't take the bike because I'd fear that it could rain and then I look like I've had a shower, or I get dirty on the way. So I'd also need alternatives as well. And that already explains how much of a variation there is in the needs profile. Mrs. Reker, when you look at your city, and you look at the people who don't just live in Cologne but also work in Cologne, people commuting into the city, what should they be doing? Well, I think speedy cycle paths, or speedways for bicycles, unimpeded ones should be built into the city, and there should also be pickup points where commuters reach the city by train, for example. I mean, in Cologne we have over 280,000 commuters coming into town day in, day out, and quite a few people are coming from far. I mean, those people could never come by bike because it simply couldn't be done in half a day. And I think for them, they need something that they can use the bike from where they get spat out from the train that they use to do the remote distance. Professor Gibb, sometimes it's also about avoiding a certain path or a certain way. I mean, co-working spaces in rural areas, because in the city that's already there. Are there some new things that have developed as a consequence of the pandemic? Well, yes, of course. I mean, you already mentioned co-working. I think that is something that is coming strongly. And I think the concept of home office, I mean, we're suddenly discussing concepts that would have been completely outrageous or unacceptable only 2 years ago. And I think we're discussing lots of things without there being thought blocks or real negatives. Well, we have also noticed that working at home works in areas where 2 years ago would have thought it impossible. I mean, they were really benefiting from a high degree of digitization. Mrs. Reker, a question for you about inter-authority or inter-municipality networking, because the movement isn't just within Cologne alone, but also with neighboring municipalities and cities. Do you exchange views with them? Yes, of course. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't make sense, because the beginning and the end of a trip often are in different cities. I mean, that is why I like the concept of regions, because it is obvious we can't just be self-focused here, otherwise we will not make our targets. This isn't just true of traffic and transport alone, but also for economic activity this holds true. And I think sometimes it is something that people in other cities don't understand, that the city of Cologne says if you want to park within the city center, it is going to cost a lot of money. They find that unacceptable or unappealing, but that is true. I mean, you have to realize how expensive a parking space is within an inner city area such as Cologne. And I think that is what you'll have, so that if you decide to take your car into the city center, and that if it is a car that is not e-powered, that then basically you have to pay quite a lot of money to park it in a city. But I think those clear statements are what's needed. My feeling is that we're basically ducking and covering a lot. We're not so outspoken when it comes to these things. Well, you just talked about human-centric approaches. I mean, in a sense, we should also invent new language. I mean, if you say car-free, people shy back from it because they feel they lose things. I mean, you can shock people by this. Now, if as of tomorrow we'd say you no longer have mobility options, you'd also shy back. So basically, we have to offer alternatives. And we can say there's a better way of getting to your target, or there is an alternative way. I mean, it's neither better nor worse, but it's somehow different. And to then show what the advantages are, and to then show that it makes sense to think about these things. I mean, I think that will help. Mrs. Reker, I think it's important that you have scientists on board as of the start. We have heard that that is not always the case in Germany. But how do you perceive this trend of polisMOBILITY so that all these people get together and try to achieve something conjointly? Well, I think this getting together at this level of polisMOBILITY is a unique opportunity, because that alone can bring value add by not just trying things, but also getting to know forms of mobility that you wouldn't have thought about in the past. I'm always very pleased of hearing from men of my generation that they actually have their car to themselves because their children no longer want to borrow their car like they used to when we were young. Sometimes they don't even have a driving license because they feel they don't need it. And I think society is changing. I mean, same as you now see with home office applications now, I think it's very important that we aren't just on the road, mobile on the road, but also mentally mobile, keep our brain mobile, and think about things positively. Well, possibly one last question to the scientists. Does that mean that we can discover mobility for ourselves as well? Just like Mrs. Reker says that setting examples isn't going to do it, but there are generations coming who have to develop their own ways of doing this. I think that's very true, and I think the same thing holds true if you look at the passage of time. I think future cities will be cities for younger generations, and that is something we have to do, go about responsibly, and we basically have to proactive in looking at what that generation wants for their life, how they want to live, and that is something we need to start thinking about today, because if we don't do it now, it won't be there tomorrow. I would very much hope that our society basically walks through this life, is curious, tries things, and hopefully has positive experience, and then pass it on. Professor Jip, Mayor Reker, thank you very much for this very lively discussion. I wish you a sunny day, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you again soon. Thank you. Well, that takes us to the practical part of things. We have now heard lots of different things. We've heard about research results. We've heard about what people think and feel. And I think smart cities and mobility, Professor Jip confirmed this from a science point of view. If we want to bring about a change when it comes to traffic and transport, we need different modules, we've heard. With polisMOBILITY in 2022, we are going towards a trade fair event that will determine the whole of Cologne and its environment. And we're talking much more than just impressive trade fair booth. We're talking about a man at the center of mobility here. We want to really develop things in the way of best practice. We want to be in constant contact and get feedback from our citizens for whom we're doing all of this. Now, in the past, the cities basically took life from the people. It was important to be able to quickly go into and out of a city in your car. The perspective now is changing. Also, the pandemic has changed our point of view. More and more often we have messages about cities that want to be car-free, or at least have car-free centers. Lots of people want to make cities into a real life center again. And that is what polisMOBILITY wants to show with Experience Exhibition 2022. And I look forward to showing you our trailer.
Dear participants, wonderful welcome to this great press conference, polisMOBILITY 2021 and 2022. So great to have you here in the studio and on the screens. Following the DLR study and following the first emotional visual insight into polisMOBILITY, now I have the pleasure to discuss the substantive aspects of that trade fair. Now, what's the driving forces for us, for human beings as a whole, for the members of staff of the Cologne Messe? Professor Yip and Ms. Reka and others have already said it at the outset. The question is, how do we want to live in future? How do we want to live in the cities? The needs of people are changing, and the needs of cities in future change. Urban space needs to be redefined. It is about sustainability, but it is also about a livable and a lovable city. The key, from our point of view, is clearly the mobility issue. The key is intermobility, because future-proof mobility concepts use flexibility between modes of transports. And that's why we are envisaging an intermodal polisMOBILITY. It is about this road, about rail, about air, etc. So it is about all modes of transport in the city of the future. And the quality of life in urban space plays a very important role. The credo of a mobile lifestyle will be use and share instead of owning. We are talking here about mobility as a service, for example. In order for this to work, digitization plays a very important role. We need digital technologies, we need networks, we need 5G, we need also smart networks and navigation systems, powerful systems. That's why it is very obvious that changes are in front of enormous changes and are urgently looking for solutions. We heard it from the study, the DLR study, presented by Professor Yip. There are solutions already in place across the world. And the study has shown that there's various different players involved involved in these concepts, very complex concepts, and we want to show this complexity and make it transparent at the city at the city of Cologne, the polisMOBILITY Trade Fair. Dear participants, where do we want to live in future? How do we want to live in future? Well, we've been focusing on various different products, but not only. It will not be a product showcase only. Our partners, our exhibitors, will exhibit solutions. Solutions that are already available or future solutions. How to help cities embark on that way to that future. That's why we have a 360-degree view. All industries, all different sizes of cooperation will be brought together at this location. So we will present those solutions not just at the fairground, but also in the city itself. So that the citizens of the city can have a go, can experience these solutions. So across the entire year also, we want to have an inspiring exchange of people from the mobility community. Now let's look at the subject matters. If you look at this here, it shows the 360 degrees approach of ours, because urban mobility is important for us in its entirety. It's so diverse, and that what we want to bring all these things together, we bring them all together. It's an interplay. They are mutually interdependent. We are talking about driving a car, but sharing smart charging, hydrogen, e-charging stations, sustainable and environmentally sensitive telematic systems, but also cloud technologies, blockchain, mobility as a service, and that mega subject here of artificial intelligence. That will facilitate the smart city of the future. That's why we want to also embrace the urban development community here, create the city of the future. So our concept is 360-degree views, that means we have lots of different focus groups. In addition to the mobility community, we also want to address the public sector. Urban development. What does it mean, the public sector? The transportation departments, to have the municipalities, to have the city administrations, city planners, politics, people from various different levels of the political and public administration, right down to NGOs, grassroots initiatives. On the industry side, we want the automotive industry, the automotive supply industry, the traction industry, platforms, mobility as a service technology. I talked about that already. Networking, infrastructure, telecommunication. Alternative energies are very important here, will have their place on the platform. And, of course, innovation from the start-up community. That all is to be welcomed here at the polisMOBILITY here in Cologne. Now, dear listeners, dear viewers, how can we bring all of these people together? Well, we opted for a multi-modular expo event. polisMOBILITY is, on the one hand, exposition, event, experience, city parkour, all in one. And we use 3 pillars for that, 3 formats. In the city, on the fairground, first we have the exhibition. We're expanding, networking, presenting on the fairground here, the mobility of the urban space in the future. Not just solutions, but also products, but not only products, but also solutions. And we'll have thematic stands, exchange, a very important area. Here we bring people together. Interaction, interactivity, surprising, innovative, new formats. We will have bar camps, we have hackathons, what have you. On the ground, next to the thematic stands, experience, the third pillar. And that is the bridge we built between the fairground and the city of Cologne. And of course, Cologne is the best place to do that because the city is only a walk away from the fairground. So to have a live showcase of mobility in the midst of the city, we send people on the test park who are 13 kilometers between the fairground and the city, various different hubs to alight and embark, the various different modes of transport, 100% emission-free vehicles, of course, or applications, what have you. So we will showcase best practice in the middle of the city. Where is there mobility? Of course, in the city. That's why I would like to highlight the importance of the city. That's why we are also very pleased that the Cologne Mayor Reka supports us so much, because mobility, urban mobility, is the focus of polisMOBILITY. That's why it's only coherent that we have developed all of this, the concepts, together with this city administration, and bring this concept into the city the way I've just described it. So we are close to the citizen, promote discussion and exchange among citizens. Get a dialogue and listen and experience what mobility of the future really means. In real life, we will be able to communicate the solutions much more directly than before. Make it available to as many people as possible. Where can you do that best? In the fourth largest city of Germany. It is a transportation hub, Cologne, and it is also a symbol, therefore, for authentic, mobile, urban life. And that's why the location here is a prime location for polisMOBILITY. And that's why we're looking forward to the cooperation with the city of Cologne and with the implementation of our concepts and ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, how can we expand the reach beyond Cologne? How can we reach the worldwide mobility community? By giving this industry and this community a digital home. We have experience. We have the Demexco, we have the Gamescom, we have had digital platforms, we have created trailblazing products, and we will continue this. With the polisMOBILITY next year, we have a 365-day platform. As of that initial exhibition, there will be exciting news from the worldwide community, from the major cities, as we learned from the study presented earlier. There will be very targeted communication, there will be matchmaking, and there will be online events of the highest orders. And of course, we have our website already, and there we will have an online magazine with all the important elements. polisMOBILITY will also be a platform, because everything we do today needs a platform, and the mobility community will be welcomed at the polisMOBILITY platform. That is our concept, that our partners also organize their events under the umbrella of the polisMOBILITY, within the context of polisMOBILITY. we will have congresses that are hosted elsewhere, will be bundled here in Cologne and organized here. That creates a platform and such a roof for the mobility community. Talking about partners, we have had very promising first talks already. Of course, you can imagine that we will not be organizing this from our high-rise building here in Cologne. We have been working with intensively with partners from various different industries for 12 months now, from the mobility industry, from the energy industry, but from the infrastructure community. And of course, we will be looking at sustainability and startups. There's open doors only when we present this to others here, this concept and this idea. We are very proud to tell you here that a whole host of trade associations, etc., have already voiced their commitment to Polish mobility, and we will be welcoming our sponsor here, the ZVIE, later down the line during this press conference. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see, Polish mobility is more than just a trade fair. The mobility issue is rethought holistically, in a hybrid, demanding and future-oriented concept. We're not showing products, but solutions. We have a live experience of mobility at the trade fairgrounds, in the city center. We are delivering innovation and driving exchange with very exciting and surprising conference and congress formats, and driving the solutions and giving answers to the challenges worldwide. And therefore, polisMOBILITY supports the new mobility movement across the entire, in a diverse and agile and lively fashion. Well, just like the urban life is. I invite you to Cologne from the 18th to the 21st of May 2022 to witness this unique event together with us. Kickstart it and make it a strong trade fair. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. And that now takes us into the second part of our event here. I would be very happily reminding you of the fact that you can send your questions, you become actively involved, and we now talk to people who are partners of polisMOBILITY, but are also somewhat the makers. Mr. Bussmann has already been mentioned quite a few times, and I think he basically has brought Polis with him and can also tell us how this came about. But we also have Dr. Wolfgang Weber as a virtual guest. He's a director of the ZVEI, the Association of Electrical and Electronics Industry. Hello, Mr. Weber. Hello. Well, modern technology makes this happen for us, that you can be here too. But let's start with Mr. Friese. Does Germany still need another trade fair format? It absolutely does. Yes, of course. As I just said, we have very intensely discussed this with lots of different partners, different interesting bearers of ideas in the energy industry, automotive industry, infrastructure, also among startups. So there is a very strongly felt urgent need everywhere to basically conceive an event that thinks about mobility in an intermodular context. Because mobility is being decided in cities, in city centers, and we need much more than just the products, but to really have generic solutions. This is not going to be a show of products, it's a solutions-orientated event, and we basically will speak to expert audience. It's a B2B2C event, because we'll have B2B visitors and also consumers, final customers. at the end of the line. And lots of people have said, yes, exactly, that is what we could do with. And it actually really motivated us strongly to go this way together with Professor Bussmann. Well, I mean, there are already the first questions coming in for you. And here it is about the rhythm. Is it going to be every 2 years, every 3 years? Well, I do think with the speed of innovation and digitization and the innovative strengths that we do see in cities today, and also that the need to modernize and innovate it necessitates to start off with an annual event. What the emphasis will be for each and every one will obviously decide from the one to the next, but I think it will have to be an annual thing. Well, somebody said intermod. Would you say that that is something that we will merge with polisMOBILITY, or how are we going to go about this? No, I mean, the intermod that you're talking about, it's the World Lead Fair for motorcycles happening in Cologne. I mean, that is a separate event, and it is going to happen as that single event. But I mean, as we have a strong know-how in the field of know-how, we have the competence when it comes to this. We'll see what people fit into where, but we continue to have intermod separately. Well, you're obviously burning for this format. I mean, well, there is this saying that we say horses only ever jump as high as they need to. You're jumping a lot higher. So, I mean, we're really establishing something new. It's courageous. What is pushing you? Well, I really look forward to the time post-corona pandemic conditions, because here we're thinking about intelligent new trade fair concepts, so amending existing concepts, but to also have new concepts available. This is what we're presenting here today, because we're really convinced that trade fairs are undergoing a development. They will develop into events, live events, touching something, seeing something, taking it home in the evening. And I think post-corona and post this pandemic time, there is going to be an urgent need to make up some of this leeway, and that really drives us with our purpose. And the purpose is to bring people together, and we just think that 2022 is going to be the first proper post-corona pandemic year, and we want to be ready for that. And then it's a great time. Summer, May, we'll have better weather than otherwise will be in early spring or the autumn, so we can do lots of things outside, and I really look forward to do that. Professor Bussmann, the Polis family is increasing, because there are quite a few things that you're already doing under this umbrella. So how do you view the synergies with Cologne Messe? Well, it is, in fact, a large family, or it's grown into being a huge family. But let me say, I'm incredibly happy that it's come to that. It's very important for us as a publishing house and for the Polis Group. I think this family has grown from the nucleus of a thought that originated in my studio. Polis isn't just a translation of city, but Polis has got something really beautiful, and that is the fact that we as citizens can become actively involved, and we're no longer separated into the administration and then us as citizens. So this form of thinking Polis, of this political thinking of the concept of a city, was always motivating for me, and that made me found a specialist magazine 30 years ago, and it's accompanied me to this day. 7 years ago, we started with the Polis Convention, where we brought together real estate and property developers and brought them together with city and municipal representatives in the sense of conjoint design, urban development, and we basically see important forums for consultation. I mean, this cooperation that we now have with Cologne Messe is incredibly exciting. I mean, we've never thought about doing things in a city without thinking about infrastructural access to it. I mean, even in the medieval times, things happened at the market square, but you needed to get there, needed to get your products there. And the same holds true today, because basically talking about these concepts has got something to do with the idea as to how we want to live today. And that was something that we discovered together when we were talking with Cologne Messe at the time. And we very quickly understood how fruitful this conjoined approach was about thinking about urban structures and mobility within a city, making a city worth living in, new ways of neighborhoods, a new organization of conurbations. And we just felt that this is something that just had to be done. And that is why Polis gave birth to yet another baby. And that baby is one I'm particularly proud of, because I myself could have never been able to father that project on my own. And now we as parents, we, together with the Cologne Messe, give birth to this new child that we will then hopefully integrate it into our societies. I mean, Mr. Bussmann, you obviously have clear ideas as to what's going to come. I mean, you've prepared the ground, and then polisMOBILITY is also going to be basically a forum for meeting. It isn't just going to be a trade fair for a few days, but there is meant to be a website 365 days around the year. Well, you talked about platform and all year round already. I mean, this original idea of just meeting once a year, that was always a good idea. The same we had with the Polis Convention in Düsseldorf, but it's embedded into a convention. And the underlying idea is that we want to involve the municipal people, the population, our citizens. And that's also a core thought here, because when I think mobility has become a social question, a question for a society as a whole. It's no longer just about buying a passenger car privately with a private contract and your money, but it is also the question as to how do we want to use this city space and to have a city offering that we make, and that can be happening via polisMOBILITY, and we'll meet once a year, yes, formally and basically physically, but there is going to be thinking and developing and doing way beyond that throughout the year. Mr. Weber, you were one of the first ones on board because your association has already joined the bandwagon. What convinced you? Well, we certainly are the technology component in this construction, and I have to say this construction was one that convinced us ad hoc and at once. The idea of building a platform, bringing together the different partners, and I think this is something that links a trade fair with us as an association, a federation. I think we really benefit from being brought together with others. We basically have to tie in public administration and municipalities, and we have to make sure that we can formulate things that are then being well received and hopefully accepted. So that was why we thought building a platform with exhibition experience was a good thing, and to then have an exchange, and we thought that that was really fitting for us. I've already talked about technology, and I think we basically don't feel that we invent technology and just roll it out into the population, but we think that technology should be developed taking the thoughts of the population into the equation while you're developing and before you bring these things out. And I think technological solutions can and have to, time and again, be climate-friendly examples of mobility, but really when it comes to the electrical and electronics industry, then we have to say that a lot of things are not just electro-powered, but also digital. And those two drivers, e-power and digitization, are things that we can import very easily. I mean, you just talked about public transport and you talked about modern buses, e-powered buses. You know, when I was a child, a green wave meant that you basically had some green traffic lights on a main road. And today, this is all happening via digital concepts, and electrification, I think, is one of the most important tools to get to a climate-friendly setup. You have already talked about home office applications, so it's not just more technology. Well, it can't just be done with ever more technology, but without technology, nothing is possible and nothing goes. Not even in this field of working in home office, and that is why we need polisMOBILITY. Well, e-mobility is something everybody's talking about, but successful e-mobility isn't a car, it's the bicycle. I mean, how have you perceived this trend as an industry, and also the problem during the pandemic of getting your hand to lay your hands on the right parts for that? Well, when you say E is fine, but how do we do this? Then, yes, there could be an e-powered bus, e-powered trams, e-powered trains, e-bikes, or scooters or two-wheelers. All of those have got something to do with electricity and the use thereof. So why e-powered? Because our future energy sources at the end of the day will be gained via electricity. It's going to be solar energy and wind parks, and well, possibly if it works well, then hydrogen will come in, but even the production of hydrogen will be effected through electrical applications. So yet again, we have electricity again. And this is not just focusing on e-cars, but also all the other carriers I've mentioned. Thank you, Mr. Bussmann. You said, well, mobility is always a bit of a political topic as well, and I think that's true, because I thought we're bringing the city back into its original functionality, so a way of meeting one another, well, quo vadis our cities? Well, that's an exciting question, and I think if we're honest, then in the many decades since the end of the war, we assumed that something was a fixed given. That wasn't true, and that was the mono function of cities. So the way how you lived here, the way you were tied and embedded into it, you were delivered into, but that wasn't how cities worked the decades or centuries beforehand. The mixed social area, the meeting of the social spheres, and the different uses that you could have by having different meeting areas. And at the moment, we are basically breaking free from this grip of mono-utilization of a city, and all these much more mixed uses for what we want to do with our cities and in our cities tomorrow is an exciting thought. And if you think about what's going to happen with e-commerce and home office working, a lot of free spaces that we will have to redefine. It is a challenge, but at the same time, it's the offer of a tremendous quality that can come up. And the idea that whole city districts can be redesigned, rethought, refitted and re-equipped is very exciting. And I think this is something that will lead to completely new mobility concepts. It's unavoidable, basically, as a linear consequence. And that was also what Mr. Weber said. The technological options that we have through this cross-sectoral approach to mobility, electrification, etc., shows that there is going to be scalability of mobility from the smallest to the biggest, and we have new ideas of the quality of public spaces that I find totally exciting, and understanding polisMOBILITY in that way is right, I think. It is an invitation of joining forces, and it's not about being critical here and constructive there, but to just let us go together all the way and let us understand it as a joint task for all of us. And I think possibly that would be quite a good approach for us as a society as a whole. This joint ability of creative design, that would come back into the center of definition. Mr. Friese, as the lord and master of this event, you've got the last word. We've heard lots of interesting things. We've heard lots of things that have triggered our thoughts. So who is invited to co-design? Whom would you like on board? Well, just like Professor Bussmann already said it, this is an invitation to join polisMOBILITY. Everybody who's interested in designing mobility of the future, and that's irrespective of their vehicle, on the road, on the water, on rail, on an aerial roadway. All those who want to can go this way with us, and also the society living within these cities, citizens' dialogue, getting together to then think about what we want for coming years and to hopefully have a great event for the mobility of the future, and in doing so, making a contribution to cities more worth living in future. Well, thank you, gentlemen, those here, and Mr. Weber afar. So, thank you very much for the interesting exchange and the encouraging statements. Please follow the website of Köln Messe, and do keep an eye on the new formats coming up. It'll be worth your while. Thank you very much for having participated. Thank you for having abided by all the Corona rules. And thanks to all of you, yours, Katja Diel.